The newborn baby. Newborn baby is called a neonate. Anyway, by the way, I should say on the side, I did provide study guides for each of the tests, and a lot of the words I talk about on these mini lectures are in those study guides, so you can look them up for spellings and that sort of thing. Anyway, the newborn baby is born with most of its senses really working well already. Their sense of taste is very well developed, and they already have taste preferences. They like sweet tastes like vanilla and honey, and they don't like sour. They don't like bitter. They do, however, like salt. They don't seem to mind the flavor of salt, and that probably has some survival value because our bodies are made out of salt water, and we have to crave a certain amount of salt and a certain amount of water in order to stay in balance. Also, our sense of smell is well developed at birth. It's a very primitive sense with the most direct route to the brain of all the senses, and it's very well developed at birth. Babies already prefer, again, sweet smells, and they don't like pungent or putrid smells. The sense of hearing, if I talk about that for a minute, we can actually hear even before we're born. We can hear in the womb and may actually have preferences for some of the things we hear, like familiar voices or familiar tunes, after we're born. When we're born, our hearing is actually quite good. In some areas, at very high pitches and very low pitches, we may actually hear better than an adult. And so our hearing is very good too. We do have a little bit of water in that middle ear when we're first born, because when the baby's in the womb, it's breathing in and out amniotic fluid. And that takes a couple days for that to drain down. But it might be like you were listening with water in your ears in the shower. But in spite of that, they hear pretty well. And they can localize sounds. If you click to the side, they'll turn to see where is that sound coming from. And so their hearing is actually quite good. Vision, on the other hand, is not so good. At birth, baby's vision is about 2600. You know, a person, an adult with good vision is about 20/20. That means at 20 feet away, they can read that eye chart, as well as a person with good vision should be able to read it standing 20 feet away. Babies are 2600. It's like they're standing 600 feet away. Does that mean that they are blind? No. In fact, if you get right in their face, they can see you pretty well, and they love looking at things, but it's that their visual field isn't very far. Human faces in particular, they love looking at. I always enjoy looking at infant vision tests and all the different ways they test infants, what they can see, what they prefer. You know, they'll hold up two things and see which one the baby prefers to stare at. I sometimes have questions about that, though. Let's say you hold up something green, and then you hold up a different color, and you notice that the baby stares and stares at the green. And even if you switch sides, the baby keeps on staring at the green. So they say, oh, babies love green. Well, how do we know? Maybe the baby's horrified by green. Maybe it's grossed out by it and can't quit staring. We don't know. We just know they're staring at it. And so then we say, oh, we'll paint the whole nursery green. And so anyway, it's fun to look at infant senses. Their touch is also very developed at birth, and so we need to be sure and give them pain medication if they need it, anesthesia, proper levels, and all of that. Okay, beyond senses, babies are born with reflexes, inborn reflexes, and some of those reflexes go away over time. Others of them stay for life, like if you get a fuzzy in your nose, you sneeze. And it's always fun to look at baby reflexes. For example, if you stroke the sole of an infant's foot, the toes will fan out and the big toe will curl down. That's called a Babinski. Another one, for example, is their startle reflex, and that's called the Moro reflex. And that is when a baby is startled, its arms and legs fly stiffly out, and then it kind of pulls in like this. If you're going to give a newborn a bath, and even so gently take off its clothing in the bathroom, you got it on a nice warm towel, that by itself is oftentimes enough to throw it into a Moro reflex. Now, an older toddler loves running around naked, but a little baby that small, it's used to being in that dark, warm womb. It's not used to being all out there, and so it'll fly into a Moro. There's a number of other reflexes too, like sucking. You know, if an adult sucks on a straw, it's a voluntary thing, but if you put something in an infant's mouth, it'll automatically start sucking on it. Grasping onto things too, that's an automatic reflex for infants. And so it's fun to look through the different charts on infant reflexes. In addition to that, let me talk just for a minute about cognitive development of infants. This is a time of huge development for them in terms of their brain. When they're born, their brain is only about 25% of its size. By the time they're 2, it's 50. Oh, I'm wrong number there. 25% at birth. By the time they're 2, it's 75% of its growth. By the time they're 5, it's on up to 90%. So you see how much they grew just in the first 2 years of life. And so not only are they developing nerve cells, but the nerve cells are reaching out and connecting to all the other nerve cells in the brain. And it's called transient exuberance. They grow so much. As a matter of fact, they grow so much that later they have to start pruning back some of those unused connections. All right, lower brain centers develop first, and then finally, at the end, upper brain centers like the cortex develop. And that's why, if you think back, what is your youngest memory that you can come up with? Oftentimes people can't remember anything before the age of 3. It's called infantile amnesia. Because most of infant memory comes in at the middle part of the brain, there at the hippocampus, but their cortex, the higher order brain centers, are not well developed yet. And that's where we store our long-term memories. And so they're having more trouble getting them on up there where they can be stored as lifelong memories. Not that they can't remember at the time, but they're just not stored as permanent memories. The biggest person I know of who studied cognitive development of infants was Piaget, a Swiss biologist. And he said during the first year and a half of life, children are going through what he called the sensory motor period. In that time, children are discovering the world through their senses using their motor skills. And he said children during the first year and a half of life have no sense of self. That is, I don't know that I am in me and I'm in this skin, I have my own will and all of that. He also said they have no symbolic language. They don't have words yet, so they can't sit back and think about things, he thought. Also, he said they have no object permanence. That means out of sight, out of mind. If I'm not thinking about it, if I'm not looking at it, rather, I can't think about it. Today we have quite a bit of evidence that that isn't exactly true. That younger infants, even if you hide it under a washcloth, they may not know what to do to retrieve the toy, but they know that thing is under there. And they indicate it by how they look at the thing and the distressed look on their face. They may even press on it. They just don't know what to do to get it out. Okay. Also, he said, at this age, children are developing schemas of the world. Schemas are concepts of the world. And we get a schema for mom, we get a schema for dad, we get a schema for kitty and other things. Schemas are just our concepts of the world. And once you develop a concept, anything that's sort of similar to that, you just kind of assimilate it in and say, okay, that fits with that category also. So, for example, let's say a child knows about a red rubber ball because they have one. And this child's, maybe, 15 months old. And so you hand this child who has a red rubber ball, you hand them now a tomato. You know what they're going to do? They're going to try to bounce it or throw it, only to be surprised when it splats. I know with myself when I was a little child, my mother told me that I said that I told her, I pat the kitty. And she was concerned because we didn't have a cat. And so she said, show me the kitty. And I took her off into the other room and squatted down where I was petting a dead mouse in a trap. And it was good enough. For me, it looked like a cat. I thought it was good enough. But eventually children begin to grow to the point that they have to accommodate that not everything that's an animal is a kitty. There's other things too, and they have to change their basic categories. Now, Piaget also did have subcategories for this first stage of life, and you can look through those various substages. The one that I think is most interesting is called tertiary circular reactions. And this is between about 12 months and a year and a half. And this is when children are like little scientists. And instead of just repeating the same action with a toy or something, they experiment all different ways with it. So let's say they're sitting in their high chair playing with a toy. They may taste it, shake it, bang on the tray, and pretty soon you notice that it's on the floor. And so you go, oh, honey, you dropped your toy. So you go over, pick it up. And pretty soon you notice it's back on the floor again. And, oh, you dropped it again. You retrieve it again. 2 seconds later, you're thinking, what a clumsy child. They keep dropping their toy. No, they're not dropping it. They're playing fetch. They've discovered that they can make you do that. And so it's just fun to see all the different ways, like their cereal bowl. They play with it. Pretty soon they wear it on their head. They just experiment all different ways with all different kinds of things, and that makes it a really cute and funny little age.